What most YouTubers would do is make a video about a recent topic in order to get that sweet recent search traffic. And since you saw the title of this video, you probably think this video is going to be about Fire Emblem Engage, and I could make a video talking about it. About whether it's good or bad, about how different it is to Three Houses, how that push-up minigame is going to end up giving me arthritis. I'm not going to do that today, and that may tickle your pickle. Steve, you're asking? If you're not making a video about Engage, then what Fire Emblem game are you talking about? With 23 games in the series, according to Wikipedia, there's a couple of choices. Fates, Awakening, that one that came out on the Switch for a limited time, which I didn't buy because I'm a fucking idiot. No. The one we're talking about is the most infamous of the lot. It's the most notorious of all the Fire Emblem games. Not only for its premise, but for its gameplay. And the one we're talking about is... yeah, we're talking about that Fire Emblem game. Before we get into the nitty gritty, I gotta lay out some knowledge for you youngsters. Back in the days of 2010, Kaori Ando, a Nintendo producer, pitched the idea of a Shin Megami Tensei Fire Emblem crossover. Eventually, the idea got passed on to both developers. Atlus, creators of Persona and Shin Megami Tensei, and Intelligent Systems, developers of Paper Mario and Fire Emblem. Both were pleased and agreed to the idea, and the development began with Atlus spearheading the operation. Eventually, the game would come out to a splintered release. Japan got it first on December 26, 2015, followed by the US and Europe getting it on June 24, 2016, and Australia getting it on June 25, 2016 for some unknown reason. All these versions would be released on Nintendo's most successful platform ever, the Wii U. Despite the Wii U's success, the game was re-released on the Nintendo Switch worldwide January 17th, 2020. This specific release on the Switch is the one we'll be talking about today. And by now, I'm sure many of you have typed out a comment something along the lines of, "Steve, how is this a Fire Emblem game? What scheme are you plotting?" Well, don't worry, we'll get there in time, but let me summarize the story and premise of the game first. One day, friends Itsuki and Tsubasa attended an audition to become idols and were attacked and brought into a mysterious world. There, they freed spirits called Mirages and united with them. After joining the Fortuna Entertainment Company, they joined forces with new friends and fight back against this mysterious threat with the power of song and dance. Yeah, with a summary like that, you're questioning whether this really is a Fire Emblem game is warranted, but the FE in the title is no lie. Remember those Mirages I mentioned earlier? Well, these Mirages are based on characters from different Fire Emblem games, going as far back as the very first one, Shadow Dragon and Blade of Light. Some of these include Chrom, Tiki, Kine, and Taraja. These characters, paired with the main plot of the story, which I'm not going to talk about in order to avoid spoilers, drive home this game as a clear member of the Fire Emblem family, even if it's the far-off adopted stepchild. This idea of the stepchild analogy comes from the fact that Atlus was the lead developer on the game. I mentioned that earlier, but let's bring it up next. The game was developed by Atlus, but Intelligent Systems played a major part in the development process. It would be more accurate to describe it as Atlus being in the driver's seat and Intelligent Systems being in the passenger. So with this game being a Fire Emblem game, what did Atlus do with the gameplay? Tokyo Mirage Session FE is a dungeon crawler where you explore different and unique dungeons while fighting enemies in a turn-based combat system, with the goal being to reach the end of the dungeon and fight the boss. If that at all sounds very familiar, well, it should. Atlus basically just copy-pasted their Persona and Shin Megami Tensei gameplay formula and just added Fire Emblem characters into it. But don't let that necessarily put you off. Originally, the game was set to have a sort of grid-based combat system, not unlike the main Fire Emblem series. But Atlus had no expertise in this style of game, the studio mainly being known for more conventional RPG styles. When the initial demo was shown to producer Yamagami and Intelligent Systems staff, they persuaded Atlus to stick to their strengths and make a game they know how to make, and they made something absolutely fantastic. The combat system is not unlike that of Persona or Shin Megami Tensei. The combat starts with you fighting alongside two party members making up a group called the main cast. Each character in the main cast has a list of spells and skills that they can use to beat enemy Mirages. Certain Mirages have weakness, you hit them, blah 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 blah, you get the point. Atlus really stuck to their guns and made a combat similar to their other games, but what makes Tokyo Mirage Session unique in terms of combat is session attacks and score. When you hit an enemy's weakness, your party member follows up with a specific attack, followed by another team member, then another, then another, then another. Take this as an example. You attack an enemy with a fire weakness. Then one of your party does a session attack because they have a sword skill that allows them to hit when you hit a weakness with fire. With that, your session score becomes 1. Then you have another ally that attacks with their lance because it chains from a sword skill, and your session score becomes 2. In the early game, your session score won't get that very high, but in late game, it gets crazy. There is no better feeling than watching the session score climb and climb through the roof. Getting back to my point, if my last video is any indication, I'm a fan of the Persona series, and coming from that to Tokyo Mirage Session was a breath of fresh air. It felt similar enough to understand the combat, as many of the magic spells share the name from the other series, but it also felt fresh enough at the same time that it kept me going even after 20 hours in. So, going down my list of reasons why this game is an underrated classic, we can go ahead and cross combat off that list and move on to the next point. To me, the main cast in this game is absolutely fantastic, and they're all extremely likable. Aside from Itsuki and Tsubasa, who I mentioned earlier, you got Toma, Kira, Eleanor, Mamori, Yoshihiro, Makio, Barry, and Tiki. Each one of them is written fantastically, and while you get to learn more about them over the course of the main story, where they really shine is in their side stories. In the game, each of the side characters has a couple of side missions where you'll learn more about them and their goals. If I was going to compare it to Persona, I'd almost call it like a diet social link or confidant, but don't let that dissuade you. What makes each character so much fun is that each one has a different expertise in the entertainment industry. Idol culture, Japanese Sentai shows, American drama, modeling, TV variety shows, rock and roll, and theater. These different types of entertainment each play a part in these characters' development as they strive to become the best in their respective fields and come to terms with what it means to be a part of that field. Usually with RPGs like this, one or two of the characters get left at the wayside because they don't interest me. But all the characters in this game have a certain charm to them that makes them one of a kind. Alright, cross characters off the list. Now let's move on. Aside from gameplay and characters, there are a lot of little things that elevate this game just a cut above the rest. For one, Atlus put a dungeon in this game with a very specific purpose. In this optional dungeon, you can fight enemies, and when you beat those specific enemies in this specific dungeon, you get an item that would level up one of your party members. This feature is a godsend. If you've ever played an RPG before, you know the feeling of needing a party member for a specific fight only to remember that they're several levels below, and now you have to grind them up in order to get them up to snuff. This dungeon completely eliminates that problem. You can go grab a couple of items, get out, and bam! Your party member who was 6 levels low is now the same level as everyone else. It's perfect. I cannot express how much of a time saver this feature was in my first playthrough. And in my second playthrough, I just farmed items until I could bring all my cast members up to max level right at the start of the game. Just that little feature of this dungeon showed how much Atlus cared about the gameplay loop. That and the cosmetic items in this game. Being a collab between Atlus and Interactive, they weren't exactly shy about referencing their other games. A lot of these references come in the form of cosmetic costumes ranging from games like Shin Megami Tensei to Three Houses. Even the main store where you buy all your healing items is called the Hee-Ho Mart, with Jack Frost being the mascot. These little cosmetic things didn't have to be there, but they made them anyway in order to show how much love and care they were putting into their game, and that love emanates from every single part of this game. Before I played this game, I had heard mixed signals about it. Some people either really liked it or really hated it. And while I can say this game won't end up in my 3x3, it's still a phenomenal game that merges two series that I absolutely love, Shin Megami Tensei and Persona, and Fire Emblem. Fire Emblem fans can enjoy the overarching narrative of the game that ties back to the very origins of the franchise they love. Shin Megami Tensei and Persona players will enjoy the dungeon crawling gameplay and the side missions that allow you to learn more about your party members. While Tokyo Mirage Session FE Encore may be overlooked by some members in both communities, it truly stands out as a cut above the rest, for better or worse.